Hello, this video is the support video for Chapter 14 on sustainability, which was co-authored by my colleague Hannah Middleton, who is joining me today. So firstly, hello Hannah, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello James, thank you very much. Yeah, I've worked in the fashion industry now since the early 1990s. My background is primarily buying, although I have dabbled a little bit in the world of merchandising. I first started out working in the Far East, sort of the late 1980s. Trade agreements were relaxed, and there was a sudden focus on manufacturing further afield. So we saw a lot of UK retailers looking to countries such as China and India for manufacturing, whereas historically they'd always manufactured perhaps nearer to home in the UK and in Europe. So I found myself over in the Far East working for a variety of different retailers over there, working directly with factories over there, sourcing and overseeing the production of product, which was then sold in the UK market. Since then, I have been primarily in the UK working for a whole host of different retailers across multi-product categories. So menswear, womenswear, kidswear, jersey, knit, wovens, for retailers such as House of Fraser, John Lewis, Dorothy Perkins, TK Maxx, Jigsaw. I've also done some work over in Spain for Encuentro, and also over in Portugal with Sonar. So with a whole host of different retailers across different levels of the market.
Thank you for a very broad portfolio of roles and jobs there. I suppose for me, the first question to allow us to sort of set the context is, what is sustainability? Yeah, a huge question.
Yes. And I think the word sustainability is kind of used sort of quite loosely. But the kind of definition of sustainability is about developing something that gives thought to the future. So developing something that will not compromise the future generations, I suppose. So giving thought to the longer term. Something that is sustainable is something that has a longevity, that has a length of life cycle, I suppose, in the sense that you as a business, we talk about the three pillars of sustainability: planet, people, and profit. So sustainability in that essence is thinking about your workforce from a people perspective and making sure that the conditions they're working in are sustainable, that they are healthy, and they are that you are taking care of that workforce, and you're looking out for that workforce, and they're working in favorable conditions, and hopefully those favorable conditions will increase their productivity, which will then lead to increased profitability. And then from a planet perspective, thinking about the planet. So fashion is about taking resources and using those resources to make product, but thinking about the consequence of taking those resources from the planet, thinking about giving something back to the planet, or thinking about the methods and procedures used to make that product, thinking about how kind you are being to the planet, and thinking long term rather than destroying the planet, thinking about making product that actually avoids destruction of the product, of the planet, and looks at a longer term vision, I suppose.
Okay, so if we think about that in the context of the merchandiser, whose core responsibilities, in very simplistic terms, are sort of cluster around KPI budgeting, sales budgets, markdown budgets, margin budgets, and stock budgets, for example, what is the connection between people, planet, profit, and sustainability with that quite numerical, quite structured role of the merchandiser?
Well, as a merchandiser, and your KPI is to generate profitability, is to generate return on investment. And I mentioned when I was going through the 3 pillars that with focus on people, if your workforce are working in a favorable environment, then hopefully you will see happy workers, which will generate greater productivity, which therefore may result in improved quality of product, but also perhaps lower cost price, because there is greater productivity, greater number of units being manufactured within a time frame, for example. And then also from a merchandising perspective, thinking about the way that we use resources. So not being so wasteful of resources that we use, being more mindful of the resources we're using, and making sure that there is minimal wastage when we're actually manufacturing product and working with the supply chain. So consequently, that can also help reduce costs and boost profitability. I think historically there is this connection or this assumption that sustainable product should be more expensive, more costly. However, perhaps the final cost price may be more expensive, but there's ways to save costs in the long run, in the sense that having sustainable collection might be more appealing to your customers, so might result in higher sales. But also because you are thinking more sustainably in your production methods and procedures, you're being less wasteful, so there's maybe less costs from waste, and you're being more leaner and more agile in your production methods, which is hopefully consequently going to benefit your merchandiser from a return on profitability, increased return on profitability.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. What popped into my mind is the saying, every action has a consequence. And if you think of the merchandiser as an active role where they are deciding something like intake margin, the difference between cost price and selling price, and if they try and push that margin up and therefore try and achieve that by pushing cost prices down, the consequence of doing that could be a demotivated supply chain who can't possibly deliver effectively to new margin rates, which then pushes down quality standards, pushes down the ability to make the product if people migrate away from that industry, for example, which then in turn negates all the benefit that the merchandiser would hope for by pushing the margin down. So it's almost as if sustainability adds a lateral thinking approach to the creation of KPI budgets. I mean, you talked about the consumer demanding sustainable fashion. Is that true? Where's that coming from? I mean, who is demanding it?
Well, I think as customers as a whole are more sustainably conscious. There's been a number of different studies, McKinsey being one of them, who's been looking at consumer behavior and consumption patterns. And we as consumers are becoming more mindful of the consequence of, our consumption of fashion, for example. And there is also suggestion that COVID-19 has actually accelerated our kind of view towards sustainability, in the sense that the lockdown that we saw globally did result in less pollution and lower pollution rates and clearer skies, and left a lot of consumers really questioning the consequence of their actions and their behavior so far to date. And there is perhaps off the back of that a greater kind of wish for customers to be more sustainable in their purchasing behavior. And so brands need to be more sustainable in their approaches. Retailers need to be more sustainable in their approaches. I think if you haven't got some element of sustainability within your supply chain, within your business model, in the fashion industry, you are putting yourself in a negative position.
That's actually interesting again, because if you think of the concept to carry a bag process, where the classic starting point is researching what has gone before, researching what is to come, and building up a picture of consumers and market trends. You've got another lateral thinking process beginning to develop for the merchandiser that goes beyond just working out what sold, what was the sell-through rate, what was the rate of sale, but it's understanding the cultural impulses coming in and the way that's going to affect, I guess, bypassing the retailer, the way product is sourced, which then means the merchandiser almost has a multi-direction planning process where they've got to look towards the consumer and the market for trends, think about the implication of that on the supplier base and sustainability themes around people, planet, and profit, to then allow them to make their KPI decisions in a more rounded way rather than just in a numerical way. Does that make sense?
Yes, that definitely makes sense. I think, it's not just a case of ensuring that you achieve maybe a certain intake margin. If you look at gross trading profit is impacted not just by your intake margin, but also by your markdown spend. So if you, and also your closing stock. So if you are producing a collection that is demanded by your consumer, in this case, a sustainable collection, and you are delivering what the customer actually wants, then you're going to see higher full price sell through, lower markdown, and hopefully lower closing stock. So therefore, even though you might not have achieved perhaps the intake margin you initially wanted to achieve because of higher costs imposed by more kind of sustainable methods, processes and procedures, there are other ways that you can actually achieve that trading profit across your business.
So therefore, the final point, or the final piece of the jigsaw, I guess, is to then say, when you're creating those KPIs, it's asking how they work together. And actually, it could be a counterintuitive process where you say, I'm going to push up selling prices a bit. This is obviously is hypothetical. All businesses would be different, to maintain the margin that I give to the suppliers, or the suppliers can work around to protect their employees and their part within the value chain or the value system. But in turn, make a presumption that a range that is more in tune with its consumer base and their changing aspirations around sustainability will then actually reduce wastage and reduce markdown and reduce the need to hold high stock levels, which, whilst that wouldn't necessarily impact the profit and loss account, it would impact the balance sheet in terms of stock management and not allowing stock to become a liability as opposed to an asset. So for me, what's coming out of this is that sustainability may not immediately seem to be something that would directly affect the merchandiser, but it is something that the merchandiser can directly affect.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
As a merchandiser, there's having this awareness of sustainability and what it means to be sustainable as a business, and having this sort of open-mindedness that actually, income can be generated in different ways, perhaps moving away from the traditional kind of thought process and being a bit more open-minded and thinking a bit more about the bigger picture, I suppose.
Talking of the bigger picture, we must just touch on the circular economy. I mean, it's such a huge topic. We could talk for hours about this. But the notion that we move away from make, use, dispose into make, use, reuse, with stock staying within the fashion supply chain for longer in different guises, whether it be in product that's reconditioned or whether it's product that's deconstructed into original base fabrics, which are then re-blended into something else and re-dyed. Surely that makes this lateral thinking process around budgeting even more complex, because at any one time you could have multiple sources of stock that the merchandiser is responsible for.
Yeah, definitely would add to the complexities, but actually could also benefit, would also benefit a business in the sense that, you know, I suppose one of the biggest headaches of a merchandiser is to end the season with high terminal stock or high closing stock. If there was a way to turn that terminal stock into a positive, as in, you know, future collections, whether or not that's in its current state with modifications or whether or not that's the stock broken down and made into something else, then that's surely going to be beneficial from a kind of a financial perspective for the business, and also for a kind of image perspective, as in to be seen to be making use of what would traditionally be considered waste. Actually, instead of it going into a landfill, it's going back into the cradle and remaining in that cycle. And you're increasing the life cycle of your product. Yeah,
absolutely. Wow, I think we've single-handedly redefined the merchandiser role, and as the final chapter of the book, that's really where we leave it. We've offered the basic merchandiser role, explained how it evolves, but we're now poised to redefine it and reshape it within a sustainable context. And that is going to be, I guess, the key role of the merchandisers of today and tomorrow. So with that, Hannah, thank you very much indeed. It's been very interesting talking with you, but it would also be great to see you as well. And I'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Fantastic. Bye.